Hi, my name is Karen Whittet. I am one of the career counselors here in Career Lab, and thank you for joining me today for our effective interviewing workshop, where we'll talk about how to prepare and practice your interviews, whether you have one coming up already scheduled or you're preparing for something that you hope to have scheduled in the future. This will be a great workshop to review everything. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat or raise your hand. I'll also leave time at the end for questions. I am recording this workshop that will be on our YouTube page. So it'll be updated on that page. And I'll also send out the slides to you when we are done. So great, let's get started. So effective interviewing. So in today's workshop, we are going to cover the different types of interviews you may encounter, how to prepare for the interview, what will take place during the interview. We will review different types of questions and examples of those questions. We'll give you some strategies on how to tackle common questions that you'll encounter. We'll discuss how to follow up after the interview and then review additional resources to help you prepare and get ready. All right, so first we're going to start off with the purpose of an interview. So there are two things to think about. There is something that the employer is looking for, and then something that you, as the interviewee, is trying to get out of the interview. So for the employer, what they're trying to cover in the interview is the following. How can this candidate contribute to our organization? Can we train this candidate if they lack a specific skill? And the interview is also an opportunity for the employer to evaluate your personality, your style, your communication skills, and your ability to think under pressure as you get asked interview questions in a formal setting. And so the employer has reviewed your cover letter, your resume, any other materials that you had to submit. So they have a good idea of your overall skills. They may see that you don't have a particular skill that they're seeking. So the interview is an opportunity for them to learn about the potential of you learning a skill, and also just to learn from you more about how you can add value and contribute to the organization. And if your personality and your style is a good fit, is this somebody that they would want to work with? And then for you as the interviewee, your goals and the purpose of the interview are to demonstrate how you can add value to the organization, right? How you can help contribute to the the responsibilities that they're looking for in the position. And do your qualifications and experiences align with the position? Meaning, it also is a time for you to evaluate, is this job the right thing for me? You've been able to review it on through the job description, but the interview is a way for you to also learn, is this truly something that is a good fit for my experiences? Also, is this organization a place you would like to work? As much as the employer is trying to learn if you are a good fit, you also want to evaluate the employer and the organization to see if it's something that is a good fit for you in a place and a setting you want to work. And ultimately, your purpose in the interview is to share your experiences by telling stories. Interviewing is storytelling, giving detailed examples of your experiences so the employer can really see how you have applied the skills and experiences listed on your resume and what they're seeking. So overall, the interviews evaluate, do you have the academic background, the technical qualifications, and the skills to do the job? Do you have the personal characteristics and competencies necessary for effective performance? And are you a good fit with the organization? So those are the three main things that they're trying to evaluate. So you will encounter different types of interviews during the process of exploring different opportunities. So generally we talk about the behavioral and fit interview as one that all students will encounter at some point. And this is where they're assessing your fit in a company or a team, really evaluating your qualifications by asking you behavioral and fit questions, which we will review in a moment. And you'll see these types of interviews for internships, for full-time jobs, for research positions, for graduate school. The setting can either be individual or team-based. Sometimes you might be interviewing with more than one person. And then another type of interview is what we kind of we consider technical interviews, where they're evaluating a specific skill or your potential to learn a skill, get your skill gaining potential. And these could be a case format for a consulting interview, a CS coding interview for that technical skill, and questions about banking markets for finance interviews. And so we're going to really address the behavioral interviews for today. All right, so there are some different resources for some of these technical interviews that I just mentioned. For consulting case interviews, we have a great guide on our website, Career Lab's Guide to Consulting Interviews. We partner with a program called Case Coach, which gives you wonderful information on how to prepare and practice for case interviews. There's also the Case Practice Partners at Brown, which is a resource on our website in the case and the consulting section, which allows you to look for other students who want to practice case interviews. So if that applies to any of you now or down the road, that's something to check out. For CS coding interviews, these are resources the CS department has outlined as great ways to prepare for technical interviews. So these are also listed on our website. And then for banking markets, Wall Street Oasis, and Firsthand, which is the new name for Vault. If any of you are familiar with the Vault organization, they've changed their name to Firsthand. And they have a great guide for finance interviews that's also available. You just want to log in to that through our website, the Career Lab website, to gain access to that Brown subscription information. All right, so now let's talk about preparing for the interview. All right, so first, you want to think about researching the employer and researching yourself. So those are the two main things to think about as far as preparing for the interview. So when you research the employer, you want to understand the basics of the industry as a whole, right? The higher level industry, the organization itself, and the position that you're interviewing for. And so those three things will really give you a good overview of the different things that you might get asked in the interview. So you can look at websites, news articles, social media, check their Twitter feed, their LinkedIn page to see what they're posting, to learn more about the organization and what currently is going on. Reach out to alumni through LinkedIn and Brown Connect to have informational interviews with alumni that may be working at the organization. That's a great way to learn more. Upper class students are also very helpful. Maybe they've done an internship at the organization, or they're knowledgeable about the industry that you're looking at. And then other networking contacts. Think about previous internships you've had, supervisors, colleagues, sometimes faculty can be helpful, friends. So really think broadly when you're thinking about who to talk to about learning more about the industry, organization, and position. And then you want to research yourself. So we've learned all about the employer. Now we're researching ourselves. And what we mean by that is really doing some good reflection on your experiences. And you want to be able to draw connections between your background and skills and the job description. So that's when it's important to take that job description, really review it, and think about what are the skills that they're going to potentially ask me about, what are the qualifications they're going to ask me about, and I'm going to look at my resume and I'm going to pull examples from my resume and prepare stories to tell them. So if I get asked about these skills, I have some ways to demonstrate how I've applied that skill, how I've used that skill. So you want to study the experiences on your resume and be prepared to discuss them. You want to reflect on your past experiences. So dig a little deeper. What did you learn from them? How are you impacted by them? How are they significant in your career development, in your career exploration? So once again, you want to prepare stories that connect your experiences and skills to the requirements of the job. So it's always about making that connection between your experiences and the specific job. So rather than just thinking about going in and saying, I'm going to talk about what I'm good at, it's really thinking about what are they going to ask me based on that job description, and what are the stories and examples I'm going to be able to draw from to answer those questions. All right, so now we've done some preparation. Now we're ready to practice. So the career counselors, I'm one of the career counselors. We have 5 of us total. We do mock interviews for students. So these are 30-minute appointments that you schedule through Handshake, and it's really a great way to practice. We do them all the time. And it's a safe environment. Sometimes students just want to start off by talking about how to prep for an interview, practice a couple questions. Other students are ready to go for a full 30 minutes and do a full mock interview. But I can't recommend that enough to really take advantage of that. We also have our peer career advisors who provide mini mocks during PCA open hours. Those are just 10, 15 minutes. They'll ask you some basic questions. And that's a good way to practice too, especially if you can't get an appointment, you don't have enough time for that. You just want to do some quick practice. Also practicing with friends, upper class students, perhaps alumni familiar with the industry and organization. Sometimes when you're doing an informational interview, an alum may offer to help you prepare for an interview, so take advantage of those situations. The consulting case mock interviews with the practice partners at Brown, as I mentioned earlier, that information is available on the consulting page on our website. For technical interviews, check Handshake and the CS Industrial Partners Program for interview, mock interview opportunities. Oftentimes alums or employers will offer technical mock interviews for students, so check those out. And once again, when you're practicing, it's your opportunity to be prepared to speak about all the experiences on your resume. So that includes every section: your academic, your work experience, your activities and leadership, and your skills and interests. If you put that you like to run and your interest, or you like to cook or watch movies or whatever it is, if you do have an interest section on your resume, you don't have to, but some of you do, be prepared to answer that question if they say to you, oh, tell me what you like to cook, or tell me a little bit about how you enjoy running. So be prepared to be asked anything on your resume, and practicing that is really the best way to feel comfortable with that. The other thing with practicing is as much as we practice, we may get a question that we haven't practiced, but practicing allows you to think on your feet. It allows you to figure out how to answer questions appropriately. And so if you do get an answer, asked a question that you haven't prepared, that practice will really help you pull through and come up with an answer. Okay, so we've prepared, we've practiced. Now we're going to talk about what takes place during the interview. So some important tips. So I know we're doing a lot of Zoom interviews still. We may start seeing some more in-person interviews as the spring and summer approaches. So always want to turn off your cell phone. You want to turn off sound notifications on your computer if you're doing a Zoom interview. Sometimes I'll be in a meeting and someone's computer notification goes off and it's really loud and distracting. So make sure you do that. Remember that everyone is an interviewer. So the people who are scheduling the interview for you, the recruiter or the administrative assistant that you've been emailing with or on the phone with, or if it is an in-person interview at the reception desk, everyone is an interviewer. So you want to be on for all those people, be polite and courteous, and that can really make a good impression. Be aware of your habits. We all have different habits. Sometimes it could be fiddling with your hands, or putting the hair behind your ear, or whatever it may be, playing with a necklace or a ring. Be aware of those. So when you are ready to go and interview, you can kind of keep those in check a little bit and keep those to a minimum. So take time before answering. What we mean by this is that sometimes in an interview, we can get really flustered and we get the question and we just start babbling almost. We really go quickly into that answer. So it is okay to pause. Sometimes students feel like pausing feels like a really long time, but it's not. Believe me, with all the mock interviewing I do, pausing for a moment to collect your thoughts and then answer is appropriate. Always prepare 2 to 3 questions to ask the interviewer at the end. That really shows that you're engaged and you're taking initiative and you're curious about the position in the company. At the end of the interview, if they haven't given you any information about next steps, be sure to ask about the timeline and next steps for their decision-making process. And always get the contact information of the interviewer, whether that sometimes if you're going through a recruiter or somebody else at the company to schedule things, you may not have the contact information of the actual interviewer, so be sure to get that. For students who need a quiet space to do a phone or a Zoom interview, you can reserve one of our interview rooms on the second floor of our building, and that's available on our website. The link for that right on the homepage, it'll show you how to reserve rooms. So if you need a quiet space, you can come do your interview in one of our rooms. All right, so we're going to look at some phone interview tips. So certainly consider your location. You want a quiet place. Come to Career Lab if you can't do this from your room. Find a comfortable position. This isn't the time to be laying on your bed and talking on the phone. Really, sit at your desk, treat it as a formal conversation. Limit paperwork. Sometimes with a phone interview, we want to have our resume and notes and all sorts of information in front of us, but that can be distracting. So don't get overwhelmed with paperwork in front of you to refer to during the interview. Don't ramble. Sometimes on the phone, we tend to talk a little bit more because we're not seeing that nonverbal communication about them nodding or ready to move on or smiling or whatever it may be. So be sure to keep your answers around, a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Smile through the phone. When you smile through the phone, your voice will often the tone of your voice will change, and that's important. Varying your pitch as well, so you don't come across monotone through that phone connection. And then video interviews. We'll talk about live video interviews and then recorded interviews on the next slide. So a live interview would be over Zoom, WebEx. You are all pros at Zoom now, so you understand that technology, but some employers are using, different applications. So be sure to check those out ahead of time, any instructions they may give you, so you're familiar with that and you can feel prepared right when you need to log in. Think about the system username on your screen. Sometimes once in a while, students will still kind of just have their first name or a nickname. So make sure you have your full username on your screen. Prepare your interview space. Make sure you have a clean background. You can use the blur feature on Zoom if you're using Zoom. Make sure there's nothing distracting behind you, so the interviewer just really focuses on you and your conversation. Dress professionally, right? Even though it's on video, you still want to dress professionally. Sit up straight and look in the camera. Keep the camera at eye level, and then be sure to look in the camera. I know it can feel challenging to keep your eyes on that camera, but it's really important to try your best to do that so the employer feels really engaged. So many times in Zoom calls, right, we're looking around the room and all over the place and not really paying attention to what's on the screen. But for the interview, you absolutely want to be looking at that screen, looking at that camera. Show them that you're engaged and enthusiastic. And speak in a clear voice and certainly smile. For video interviews, you still want your personality to come through, and you still want it to be a conversation where they feel like they get to know you a little bit. And then some of you may have experienced or may experience in the future video interviews that are recorded. And this is where you're prompted to answer pre-recorded questions. An example of this is the HireView program, where employers can set the questions and the student records the answers, and then the employer evaluates them at a later time. So there's often a time limit that you're given when you're answering these questions, so be conscious of that. You may be given more than one chance to record an answer, so you might be able to go back and re-record. These can be challenging, right? Because there's not another person that you're speaking with. It's a video that asks you the question, a video of a person, a recording of a person, excuse me. So imagine you're having a live conversation. Try your best to put yourself in that mode. Don't rush, right? Even though it feels a little static in that moment, try not to rush, give your full answer. Try recording yourself ahead of time to practice. So you can get the feeling of what it's like to just record an answer. Think about how you talk normally and replicate this. Even though it might feel a little different because it's not a live conversation, do your best to just be yourself, and that will really come through in that recording. And then some of you may be doing in-person interviews either now or in the future as things are getting a little better. So if you're in that situation, this is good information for the future too. If you're doing in-person interviews, you want to bring a portfolio with a paper and pen. Sometimes you do need to write something down during an interview. It's always a good idea to throw a few extra resumes in that portfolio. Think of transportation. How will you get to the interview? And you always want to get there at least 10 to 15 minutes early to give yourself time to get lost, not find the right floor, use the restroom, etc. Attire for in-person interviews, when in doubt, always choose business professional. That's an appropriate way to dress for an in-person interview. And once again, too, going back to what I said previously, when you're doing an in-person interview, everyone you meet that day, whether it's the receptionist or someone in the hallway, you want to treat them as an interviewer, because they might be somebody who gives feedback to the manager who's hiring. And so it's always a good idea to treat everybody as someone you're interviewing with, even if it's just a short moment that you're interacting. All right, so now we're going to move on to interview questions. So there are three basic questions that you should always prepare for every interview. And these are the following. So why are you interested in this field? Why are you interested in this position and organization? And what relevant skills and experience do you have that will make you a successful employee? So once again, it's the overall industry, the field, the position and organization, and what skills and experiences that do you have that will make you a successful employer or add value to our organization. And so if you prepare these three questions, you'll probably get asked them in some way. It may not be exactly with this text, but this will make you feel really confident that you have these answers down. And then there are different types of questions that you'll encounter in most interviews. Many interviewers start off with the tell me about yourself question, which is an introductory question. It's a nice icebreaker that many employers like to start with. And so that's one that we're going to go over in a moment. And then there are resume-based questions. And these are questions that focus on current and past roles, the value of those experiences. So this is what we mean by they're looking at your resume. Oh, I see you write for the Brown Daily Herald, your student newspaper. Can you tell me a little bit more about your role with that opportunity? And so that's just something off of your resume. Personal questions, these give you the employer insights into your strengths, your weaknesses, your passions, your personality, and then behavior-based questions, how you manage different situations. And we're going to walk through how to answer those behavior-based questions, because sometimes those can be the most challenging, but they're some of the most important questions that interviewers will ask. So tackling the questions, overall, you always want to stay positive, right? I know it feels challenging sometimes interviewing, but staying positive is so important. You want to be detailed and use examples, right? Once again, it's about that storytelling, but don't spend too much time on an individual question. Remember that the interviewer has a set of questions they want to get through. You don't want to monopolize all your time on just some of the questions in the beginning. Pauses are okay. I mentioned that earlier. If you need to take a moment to reflect and think about your answer, do that. And sometimes the question may not be clear when the interviewer asks it. So ask for clarification if the question isn't clear, so you know exactly what they're asking you. All right, so tell me about yourself. The key takeaways for this question are that it's an open-ended question, so it can feel a little overwhelming. So it really tests how well you can focus. It must demonstrate how your past experiences, skills, and interests contribute to the position and organization. It's important to give highlights of your experiences and to focus your answer. Sometimes students tell me their life story when I ask them this question in a mock interview. You want to spend some time writing down experiences you wish to discuss and practice your answer. So this is definitely a question you want to expect that you're going to get, and you want to prepare that answer. So you start off that interview in a really positive place. And what is the story you want to tell in that? Tell me about yourself. And just a quick tip at the end, tell me briefly about yourself. Once again, it's not telling me a lifelong story. It's really focusing on what, excuse me, what the employer is trying to get to. All right. So we have a nice framework to use to think about how to answer this question. It's about 90 seconds, 2 minutes. The first part is where you're going to share personal information, maybe where you're from, that you're 10 Brown, what year you are. The next part is your academic experience, what you study, maybe research that you're involved in, or any academic projects. If there's a study abroad experience, an academic interest area you're focusing on within your concentration. Then the next part would be relevant experiences. So you're going to highlight some leadership activities, perhaps previous internships, work experiences, volunteer, etc. This is not going through everything on your resume. It's really just highlighting a few things that are relevant to what this position is about. And you're also not going into depth to describe all of these things, because the employer will most likely ask you in more detail later on in your questions, where you'll give more details about your experiences. And then the last part is really where you're just going to reiterate your interest in the position, given that background that you just discussed, and that you're excited, about this opportunity. Okay, so most likely the interviewer will start off with some sort of question about, tell me about yourself, and then we're going to give you some examples of some different types of questions you'll encounter. So those resume-based questions I mentioned earlier, some examples are, walk me through your resume. And this is really an opportunity for you to highlight different areas of your resume, walking through the academic, the experiences, leadership and activities, any particular skills that you have included. It's not everything on your resume, though. Once again, it's highlighting and staying focused on what's relevant to this position. Why did you choose to attend Brown? Why did you choose your concentration? What is your favorite course and why? Tell me what your role is with, a particular student organization. So most of these questions feel pretty easy. If I were to ask one of you now, I bet you could come up with a strong answer for some of these questions. And so these are ones that, yes, you should think about and prepare about what you want to say, and feel confident that you can answer these well. And then personal questions. So these can start feeling a little more challenging. What are your greatest strengths? What are your greatest weaknesses? What is one piece of feedback you received in your last internship? What is the biggest risk you've ever taken? What do you do in your spare time? Do you plan to go on to graduate school? What do you hope to be doing in 5 years? And, and how will this internship or how will this job help you achieve that goal? So these are opportunities for you to think about future goals, reflect on challenges you may had, and it's really a way for them to start learning more about your personality and your potential fit. And these are all questions that we can practice with you in case interviews, of course, in mock interviews, of course. Then behavioral questions. So the common structure for these start with, tell me about a time when, or give me an example when, but usually it's tell me about a time when, and you can read through these. You showed initiative, worked on a team project, your team failed, you received critical feedback, your team wanted you to do something you didn't agree with, you pushed yourself to achieve a goal. Tell me about a time when you worked effectively under pressure, you successfully balanced competing priorities, and you solved a problem as part of a team or a group. And so this is really where the storytelling comes into play, and I'm going to give you a nice framework to use to answer these questions. So the START framework is a great method to use to give structure to how to answer those behavioral questions. And the START stands for a situation, task, action, result, and then takeaway. So anytime you hear a question, tell me about a time when, they're looking for an actual past example, a past experience. It's not you talking about how you would manage your time well if you had competing priorities. It's giving an example of when that happened to you and what did you do. So you're going to start off by thinking about the situation or the task. So explain the issue that led you to get involved. What is the situation that you're involved in? What is the task that you had to get through or complete? And then A is action. So what did you do to address the issue? What action did you take? And make sure if it's something that's personal to you, if it's more of a group setting or a group project, they want to hear about your role. And then result. What was the end results of this action that you took? What were the impact implications of your actions? And then the takeaway, adding T to the end of this, sometimes you'll hear this framework called a STAR, but adding that T really allows you to add a little bit more. How are these skills and actions transferable to this position? What did you learn? What was your takeaway, and how can you apply it to this position and future potential opportunities? So this START framework is a really nice way to answer these questions. We want you to prepare and practice some of these questions, but if you do get a behavioral question that you hadn't thought of before, and you can think of the story, the example you want to discuss, using this framework and going through those bullet points in your head will really be helpful as you answer the question in the actual interview. All right, and then I just want to address very briefly some red flag or legal questions. We hope you don't get these, but it's important just to acknowledge that sometimes it happens, and it's very rare that we hear a student, but this can also be helpful for the future. So certain interview questions, as you can imagine, are illegal to ask. It's not always easy to know if you're being asked an illegal question, but if you ever get asked a question that you feel might be illegal or problematic, please contact us. You can meet with one of the counselors or just always, email us at Career Lab. And we have a document on our website that reviews potential red flag or legal interview questions. So examples include, citizenship, gender and sexual identity, health and disability, religious identity, age. And so if you're ever in a situation like that, please get in touch with us and we can discuss all that with you. All right, so we're almost at the end. So following up after the interview. So hopefully you rocked it. Everything went great. You're super excited about this opportunity. And now you want to follow up. So you want to send a thank you message, email is fine. Definitely send the message within 24 hours. You want to get it to them right away. Keep it brief, a couple paragraphs is fine. You want to reiterate your strengths, thank them again for their time. Maybe you refer back to a topic that you discussed in the interview and confirm your interest in the position. If you are meeting with multiple people for your interview, you want to send individual emails to those interviewers. Each one should get their own thank you email. Okay. And sometimes the person who scheduled it for you, right? I mentioned earlier, might not be the person you're interviewing with. It might be a nice gesture as well to just thank them for their time and helping you get the interview scheduled if that's appropriate. All right, then we're just going to do our quick review of our resources again. So we have our effective interviewing tip sheet that's on our website under the job and internship resources section. So that gives a lot of sample interview questions, discusses a lot of what I talked about here today. So that's a good resource for a nice refresher. The career field resources page on our website gives industry specific information. So if you want to learn more about particular industries, that's a great place to go. And there's sometimes some of those pages do have some interviewing resources when appropriate. The mock interviews with the career advisors, schedule those on Handshake, or the mini mocks with the peer career advisors you can drop in during open hours. The firsthand guides, as I mentioned, they have some different interviewing guides. They have a finance interviewing guide, a case interviewing guide, a general behavioral interviewing guide. So those are good to look out. Glassdoor students can be a nice resource to learn from peers about their interview experiences at different organizations. The case mock interviews, if that's something that you'll be participating in at some point, check out the partners program on our the case interviewing page on our website to learn about other students who want to practice with you. And then alumni on Brown Connect and LinkedIn. And then upper class students as well can be a great resource. if students are interviewing for internships and you want to get some feedback and ideas from them about their experiences.